Hello, everyone. I'm David Vaucher. Welcome to the Business of Motorsport podcast powered by Vaucher Analytics. Big news out of the sports car racing world this weekend as Sports Car 365 reported that Great Wall Motor, or GWM, has revealed plans to develop China's first ever GT3 specification race car. Quick word on terminology before I keep going. I could not find definitively whether it was Great Wall Motor or Great Wall Motors plural. I'm going to go with Great Wall Motor in the singular, and I'm just going to refer to it really as GWM. If anyone has any specific definitive answer on that, as always, you can contact the show at contact@vaucheranalytics.com. In any case, unveiled at Auto China 2026 in Beijing, the project is based on the manufacturer's upcoming Great Faith or GF supercar and dedicated performance sub-brand. The car will be powered by an in-house developed 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine, a significant departure from the brand's traditional focus on SUVs and trucks, and certainly well removed from the electric powertrains which are becoming synonymous with Chinese cars. Sports Car 365 also mentions that there will be a road-going version that will be hybridized. Now, developed under the guidance of former McLaren automotive engineer Adam Thompson, no less, the racing debut is still being finalized as far as a date, but this in no way diminishes the impact of the announcement. And if you want more information, I've linked to that Sports Car 365 article in the source article for this episode, and you can find that in the show notes. Now, before I share my thoughts on what this means strategically for legacy automakers, it's really important to place this in the evolution of GT racing, which we can call the Rettel Revolution. Now, to understand the weight of GWM's entry, one must understand the landscape and history of Grand Touring or GT racing. Before Stefan Rettel and the SRO Motorsports Group codified the GT category in 2005, Grand Touring racing was often fractured, expensive, and unsustainable. In the 1990s and early 2000s, GT1 cars had become basically prototypes in disguise, bespoke million-dollar machines that shared little more than a nameplate with their road-going counterparts. This led to a boom and bust cycle where manufacturers would enter, spend into oblivion, and then enter the sport. Now, Rettel had experience organizing racing series. He was famous, at least in France anyways, for organizing a one-make series around the Venturi, which was France's own answer to luxury GT cars. But with regards to multi-brand racing, his stroke of racing genius was the introduction of balance of performance, or BOP. Now, this term is controversial in endurance racing today, but the fan debates, in my view, sometimes omit that such systems are required to maintain a dynamic team and brand ecosystem, which is exactly what GT3's BOP led to. By using various means to equalize different engine layouts and chassis designs, Rettel created a platform where a Mustang could race door-to-door with a Ferrari. The endless debates that were happening among fans before the rule set could now be settled on track. This created the most popular racing category in the world. GT3 is beloved because it features recognizable cars that fans can identify with, competing in prestigious global events like the 24 Hours of Spa and the Nürburgring 24 Hours, and crucially, events pretty much anywhere else in the world that aren't as prestigious. Now, even though cheap is a relative term in motorsport, GT3 racing allows the enthusiast with some money set aside to live out their dreams, sometimes even racing alongside pros. Now, this is just not something that is possible in many other classes of racing, and it's this accessibility that makes GWM's announcement so significant. And GT3 will now settle debates involving Chinese brands going up against the greatest historical names in motorsport. Make no mistake, this is a direct challenge to the old guard. The significance of the GWM announcement cannot be overstated because, unlike the bleeding edge technology found in Formula One and the hypercar GTP segments, GT3 cars are fundamentally tied to road-going models. The former are race cars first and foremost, the latter are basically road cars made into race cars. This move puts GWM in a direct head-to-head comparison with story brands like Porsche, Ferrari, and Mercedes-Benz on the same tracks in front of thousands upon thousands of fans. This is a public declaration that Chinese engineering is ready to be measured against the absolute best in the world without any asterisks. Now, in a way, this moment feels like a modern iteration of the early 1990s. Decades ago, the global racing community was perhaps skeptical of Japanese manufacturers until they proved their performance on track through cars like the Acura NSX Nissan GT-R, and Toyota Supra. And of course, this was happening even decades before the 1990s. Japanese brands have been on track really almost since the beginning, or the middle rather, of the 20th century. But in terms of the cultural zeitgeist, I think hopefully we can all agree that the early 1990s is when you really started to see the birth of true legends. Now, we are likely about to see a similar shift where privateer teams, the lifeblood of sports car racing, start campaigning Chinese models. To reiterate, in the case of GWM, this will not be just one Chinese brand running its own car, but rather, eventually, private entities having the option to choose with their own money to go racing with a Chinese alternative to established names. It's reasonable to assume the appeal will start on the grounds of value, just as it has on the consumer side. However, once the performance is proven on the grid and the reliability is established over endurance cycles reaching 24 hours, the skepticism will fade, replaced by a new respect for Chinese performance hardware. So this naturally leads to a discussion on the halo effect and brand lineage. For Great Wall Motor, the GT3 program is the ultimate halo strategy. Once performance is proven on the track, Great Wall Motors can sell the road-going version of the GF supercar with genuine racing pedigree. And that cool factor then trickles down the entire price range via a dedicated performance sub-brand. Now, while GWM is apparently for now the first to plant its flag in the GT3 arena, it is almost certainly not the last Chinese manufacturer that will use the crucible of motorsport to redefine its global identity. So where does that leave legacy brands? Well, there's the cost of silence and why the nice to have mindset is fatal. Let me get into what I mean by that. For many legacy boardrooms, motorsport has historically been viewed as a discretionary line item tied to marketing, a nice to have expense that is often the first to be sacrificed during an economic downturn. However, this perspective fails to account for the invisible yet devastating opportunity cost of allowing a brand's performance racing heritage to atrophy. In a market being rapidly reshaped by Chinese automakers who move faster on features and price, one of the few remaining defensible moats for legacy brands is what I'll call engineering soul and emotional desire. Abandoning the racetrack doesn't just save cash, or rather, it does, but only in the short term via a false economy. Not pursuing racing efforts, and just as crucially, not broadcasting that participation to potential clients effectively leaves the gate open for Chinese competitors to pair their industrial scale with their own newly forged racing legends. So there's a closing window of opportunity here. The strategic risk is no longer theoretical, as the window for legacy brands to protect their market permission and their market reputation is closing. As Chinese OEMs progress to pair their structural advantages with disciplined, on-track proof of motorsport competence, the historical separation between reliable appliances and desirable performance objects will inevitably disappear. For established brands, waiting to act does not preserve optionality. It merely compounds the advantage of late entrants who are building their engineering credibility in real time. In fact, waiting and not making a choice is oftentimes a choice in and of itself. So those legacy brands that survive the coming decades will be the ones that stop treating heritage as a given in perpetuity and instead nurture it as a living strategic asset with clear governance and conversion pathways to the showroom, starting, of course, at the racetrack. And that is it for today's episode of the Business of Motorsport podcast. I really hope you enjoyed. If you want more context around this article, please do check out the show notes. In fact, I've written a whole white paper around this topic, the idea that motorsport does lead to protection of brand heritage, which is a way for legacy brands to stay competitive. It's called the Quartz Protocol, and I'll leave a link to that download in the show notes. As always, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me here on the Business of Motorsport podcast. If you want to contact the show, the email address is contact@vaucheranalytics.com. I love hearing your questions and comments. And in the meantime, before the next episode of Business of Motorsport comes out, I just want to say thank you so much again, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.